You people should be thanking Christ that I am who and what I am because you need me.
7 reasons why Homelander isn't pure evil, but a product of his environment. Explored. Okay, before you come at us with pitchforks for the title of this video, we'd like to remind you of 2 things. 1, this is just a YouTube video about a TV show. And 2, that's exactly the kind of thing that Homelander's current base would do.
He ain't your kid.
Yes, I am. I am your son. I am your blood.
So reconsider your decision, put the damn fork down, and let's chat about why Homelander isn't exactly pure evil, but rather a product of his environment. Shall we? Because while Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson's original work pretty much saddles all soups with the corrupt, degenerate label, that isn't the case for the Amazon TV show. Instead of showing the source material 100% faithfully, Eric Kripke gave his character a lot more depth, which makes his version of the boys dance around the precarious line of accidentally making a homicidal maniac actually likable.
More incentive? Okay. You kill him, or I'll fucking kill you both.
A-Train is the perfect example of this, because if you aren't unsettled by the fact that you kinda like him now even after everything he's done, there's something wrong with you. And funny enough, the same can also be said about Homelander to a certain extent.
Okay? It's nothing personal. We'll always be friends, and etc.
Because yes, he is a ruthless man-child whose only purpose in life is seemingly to make everyone worship him. But it's interesting to see how he got there. A lot of Homelander's personality can be put down to the phrase, product of his environment, even the man in the mirror. But how exactly is that? And why does it really matter? Well, that's what we'll answer in this video here. These are 7 reasons why Homelander isn't pure evil, explored. And if you haven't seen the Season 3 finale, this is your spoiler warning because there will be a lot of those. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Has changed.
I thought we should have a conversation.
I don't know who the fuck you think you are, but you got lucky once.
He was raised with a nuke aimed at him at all times. Starting this list off with a particularly nasty bit of pseudo-parenting from Vought, and while this one hasn't been confirmed in the show at all, it is one of the more contentious points of Homelander's upbringing from the comics. In Ennis' story, Homelander's conception and upbringing were radically different from what he was told by Vogelbaum in the show, because there, at least one person was physically involved, and she suffered the same fate as Becca Butcher. Instead of creating him out of a test tube, Vogelbaum's scientists implanted genetic material from Stormfront, a man in the comics, into the womb of a woman who died giving birth to Homelander because instead of crying when he was being delivered, he activated his laser beams, which caught his mother and the doctors present in the room in the crossfire. Because of such a horrific birth, Vought decided that they will raise their subject under strict supervision, and their idea of strict supervision meant that they would keep an honest-to-God nuke aimed at the kid at all times if he showed signs of going rogue, or mental.
Birthday, Homelander. Thank you.
I can see your girdle, you disgusting fat fuck. Get off the fucking stage.
Eventually, they created Black Noir as a contingency because simply nuking Homelander would create a web of complexities that would leave Vought in more trouble than he would have been with his own actions. Of course, they didn't anticipate Noir going rogue instead, but we all know how that ends. Check out our The Boys Comics Finale Explored video if you want to know more. But here's the thing, even if Noir hadn't gotten the job done, it is stated very clearly that a nuke would. The only thing stopping the latter option from being implemented is the apocalyptic winter that would follow in its wake. And there is precedent for radioactivity being an effective counter for Compound V in the TV series. Just look at anything Soldier Boy does after being set loose in Season 3, Episode 4. In fact, his first move was to blast Kimiko with his chest beam, which instead of disintegrating her on the spot, ended up frying the Compound V out of her system. A similar thing happened to Queen Maeve in the finale, where she survived a radioactive blast from Soldier Boy at point-blank range and managed to get her normal life back. Of course, there are multiple heroes who died because of his radioactive chest beam as well, but that's probably a power scaling thing, as Kimiko, Maeve, and Homelander are some of the most physically enduring soups in the series. So it's possible that a nuke could effectively neutralize Homelander in the series as well, and there is some evidence for this even though Madeline Stillwell claimed that they had thrown everything at him and nothing seemed to work. When Homelander visits Vogelbaum in Season 1, he is told a horrifying story about the birth of his own son, Ryan.
And the baby?
Lived all of 10 seconds. drowned in its mother's blood.
Of course, we later find out that was all a lie, because both Ryan and his mother Becca were discovered alive. But here's the thing, the details of that story ran parallel to the birth of Black Noir's offspring from the comics, and we think it might actually be the story of Homelander's birth instead. Because 1, it was too detailed, and 2, Vogelbaum had clearly been keeping too many secrets from him because while he did let slip that Becca was alive, he didn't tell Homelander Soldier Boy was his father, and he had his head popped open before he could even get to that. So it is possible that Homelander was raised with a nuke in the TV show as well, we just haven't heard about it. It would add another layer of analogous connection between him and his biological father, as Soldier Boy was also subjected to radiation torture during his time as a Soviet lab rat. And that kind of an upbringing is sure to leave you a little bit on edge as you continue to live your life day in and day out. Because if you know you might die in the most horrific way known to mankind for stepping out of line, you too might go crazy working for the same people for decades on end. Vought chose to treat Homie like a weapon, and chose to guard that weapon with yet another weapon. If they'd only treated him like a human being, he might not have turned out this way, because...
The plane up.
Lift the plane? How? There's nothing to stand on. It's fucking air.
I don't know.
He grew up without a family, and developed a flawed moral compass as a result. Now, this isn't to say that a family would have guaranteed that he would turn out to be a good person. Just look at Butcher's backstory if you need any more confirmation on that fact. But it is generally agreed that the one thing that Homelander truly craves is a familial connection, and that is something he has never received since his birth, because Vought needed him to be the strongest man alive, and he was just a boy back then. But here's the thing, making a person the strongest alive is more of a mindset than a quantifiable process, and strength isn't merely physical, it is also mental and emotional. Homelander managed to become the physically strongest soup in the history of mankind, but his mental state can be compared to that of a rebellious adolescent, and his emotional state to that of an attachment-deprived toddler. Because all his life, all he ever wanted was love, and as we've stated already, he was only given disdain or praise, both in lieu of his awesome strength. He had no real relationships throughout his formative years, and that has clearly left him unable to form one as an adult. This is where we want to bring up Superman, because longtime comic book fans will know just how important the Kents were to his progression as a character. Superman is an alien who came to deeply appreciate human beings despite their fragility because of the values instilled within him by his parents. In fact, even Superman admits that without Jonathan and Martha Kent, he doesn't know what would become of him. And indeed, many of his evil counterparts begin going evil when they fall out of touch with the humanity that the Kents' love had germinated with him. It's widely accepted that if Supes had grown up without a parent, he would have probably gone on a rampage and tried to conquer planet Earth, kinda like Goku, minus the tail. Now contrast that with Homelander's story, and you can see why this lack of parental guidance eventually broke his mind and spirit.
It was actually my mom who dragged me along to my first Little League practice, and
Homelander was starved for a mother's love and a father's warmth all his life. In fact, on one occasion, he killed a female doctor by hugging her too tight because he had come to view her as a motherly figure and wanted to feel the love that came with it. His Oedipus complex is a clear manifestation of this deprivation of motherly figure in his life, which allowed Stillwell and later Stormfront to manipulate him. And there's a chance that the latter may be his actual mom, and that just raises all kinds of taboo questions in our mind that we're going to figure out by ourselves. But here's the thing, in the absence of a real parental figure, Homelander created his own worldview by picking up whatever he saw from the Vought scientists, plus the thousands of hours of mental programming they subjected him to in order to become the perfect product. Of course, if they had actually given him a family to grow up with and to know real love, then a lot of his casualties would have been avoided. And while that's not a guarantee, it's a highly likely possibility, which is all but squandered by our next entry.
I'm the upgrade.
He was subjected to horrific experiments and constant propaganda as a child. So, you guys remember what the series told us about the experiments that the Russians conducted on Soldier Boy, and what it did to his psyche, right? I mean, are you telling us that you wouldn't be traumatized if someone unloaded an entire clip of an AK-47 in your mouth? Thank you for not saying that, because then you would be a real psycho, dear viewer, and we can only handle one psychopath at a time. But speaking of psychopaths, and continuing on the tangent of upbringing, Homelander was subjected to multiple brutal, downright inhumane experiments as a child to test Vogelbaum's theory of having finally created the strongest man alive.
I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better.
That mantle used to lie with Soldier Boy before Homelander, and though he couldn't shoot lasers with his eyes or fly, SB was powerful enough to withstand 40 years of Russian torture, which would have likely killed any other soup in less than half a decade. He survived through mutilation attempts, radiation poisoning, constantly being doused with Novichok, the world's most dangerous nerve agent, and he even came out of that ordeal sporting a new superpower that legitimately scaled on the Geiger counter. Though that is absolutely the worst metric to associate with any human, if you know what it measures. Soldier Boy was portrayed and sold out in 1984, when Homelander would have been roughly 3 years old, and Dr. Vogelbaum saw it fit to subject this literal toddler to horrors worse than what his biological father would face with the Ivans. Because at least Soldier Boy can categorize his problems as PTSD and work through them if he ever wanted to. But with Homelander, it's yet another formative issue. Imagine creating a being and then continuing to experiment on them whilst practically brainwashing them into becoming Jesus Christ come again for America. What you have just made is not a savior. It is a potentially world-ending explosive that can spontaneously combust at any given moment if it isn't kept placated at all times. Homelander was subjected to far worse torture as a child. Vogelbaum admitted that he needed John to be the strongest man alive and not a sweet child, so he went to work on him, which is basically boys' code for torture.
You should have been raised in a home with a family who loved you, not in a cold lab.
Homelander could have processed all of this a bit better had they just explained things to him honestly, but Vought being Vought, chose to pump lies into his characterization to the point that his very existence became tied into his identity as a soup. Homelander would spend countless hours watching propaganda films and documentaries whose purpose was to mold him into the image Vought wanted for him. That's how he became a huge fan of Soldier Boy in the first place. But all this brainwashing and mission-giving and physical and mental abuse broke Homie emotionally, to the point that he created an entirely separate personality to get through the bad room growing up.
I'm the world's greatest superhero.
You're my greatest failure.
Vought wanted him to be a Christ-loving, patriotism-toting, money-printing machine, and did everything they could do to ensure that they got what they wanted. But they completely failed to take into account the fact that Homelander himself might have things he wished for from life, and that's really what makes his descent into madness not entirely his own fault.
Hey, do me a favor. Who's the real heroes?
Homelander was interested in Teddy Roosevelt, Davy Crockett, and even being a real hero himself early on. Surprisingly enough, the most amount of information we get about Homelander's childhood is in a conversation between Butcher and Dr. Vogelbaum, and the picture that the latter paints is of a wistful young kid who actually had admirable dreams. Towards the conclusion of Season 2, Butcher realizes that if he wants to get Vought into a right pickle, he's going to have to hit them where they live and make the hit public. So, he decides to intimidate Vogelbaum into testifying against Vought by threatening his entire family, but not before he gleans out some vital information about his arch-enemy. When Butcher enters Vogelbaum's mansion, he doesn't inquire about dirt on Vought, the doctor himself, or even ask him how he could do what he did to Becca. Instead, he asks Jonah about Homelander's childhood, and the couple of sentences that we do get from the former Vought CSO paint a very, very different image of Homie in front of our eyes. Vogelbaum reveals that Homelander used to be a rather wistful and sweet young man who liked stories about Teddy Roosevelt and Davy Crockett, loved the idea of the woods, and wanted to truly manifest his own destiny. This is significant because unlike the propaganda that he would be force-fed on a regular basis, Roosevelt and Crockett represent a particularly heroic aspect of American history. Crockett is an American folk hero renowned for being relatively liberal-minded in the 19th century, and for helping Texas gain its freedom from Mexico in a historic last stand that saw him perish amidst a crowd of corpses of his own making. Roosevelt, on the other hand, is as charismatic and popular as American presidents can get, with his own personal history being extended to mythic proportions thanks to his cowboy persona and larger-than-life dealings even with the arena of politics. Both men represent truly American ideals in modern society, and so it's equally horrific that Homelander seems to have veered away off-path from his own ideals in the current times. His love for the woods continues to endure, as we can see from his clandestine sex cabin in the woods, but what really takes the cake is the fact that Homelander didn't even want to be a superhero in the first place. After admitting that John was a sweet boy when he was 5 or 6 years old, Jonah reminds Butcher of what he needed him to be, which also necessitated him going to work on the poor young boy. He follows this up by letting us know that Homie didn't even want it, but he kept at it anyway for Vought-related concerns. Still, it seems like a semblance of this true heroism did find its way into Homelander's youth, because when he joined the Seven, his initial goal was always to become the greatest hero of all time. We see evidence of this in the season finale of The Boy Presents Diabolical, where Homelander is sent to stop a robbery at a chemical plant. He arrives at the scene and actually makes an effort to neutralize lookouts and disarm the terrorists instead of straight up lasering them to death because, in the end, he wanted to save the hostages and thereby the day. But his programmed rage kicks in when he fails to realize the limits of his own power, and he ends up massacring everyone and blowing the whole plant up before covering up the entire ordeal with the PR spin of the decade. So we can see that Homelander's innate desire was to be a savior-type figure who led Americans to the newest frontier of human existence. Because of the toxic, self-serving, and torturous environment he was raised in, he ended up becoming the exact antithesis of what he believed to be his own destiny. Homelander used to think of Vogelbaum as his father. Ironically enough, what could have prevented Homie from turning into the murderous sycophant that he is today is Dr. Jonah Vogelbaum simply acknowledging his emotions and reciprocating them on a human level. See, Homelander's name in the TV show is John Vogelbaum, and there's a reason for that beyond the mere fact that Vogelbaum created him in a test tube. The reason is that for the major chunk of his formative years, Homelander viewed Jonah as his own father. During that brief 2-sentence origin story that Jonah gave to Butcher practically at gunpoint, he also brought up the fact that as a kid, Homelander would cuddle up to him. Now this can mean several things, of course. Maybe John's soup-proof cell was a bit too cold and he needed the old doctor's body heat to maintain his own temperature. Maybe John wanted to drink some milk, or maybe, just maybe, John saw Jonah as his father figure. We have already seen that he used to think of female doctors as his mother, and he even accidentally crushed one of them with a hug when he was feeling super depressed as a child. But his interaction with male characters who hold a position of authority in his life is far more subservient than the one he shares with his Oedipal woman. Madeline Stillwell pushed her luck too far with Homelander and got her skull lasered for it. Stormfront would have most certainly died had she not practically ridden his ego. But even after learning that Vogelbaum lied to him about Becca and his son, the same thing that he killed Madeline for, Homelander didn't kill his creator. Sure, he left him paralyzed from the waist down, but Vogelbaum was still alive after having lied to Homelander to his face. And the same goes for Stan Edgar, who never really cared for Homie either, way as long as he was making them money, but who always thought of him as a man-child that was constantly trying to impress Daddy. That Daddy being Edgar himself. And you can see that Stan the man is clearly right when he deduces that everything Homelander was doing was in an effort to gain his respect. Because the reaction Homelander gives him when he is called bad product, he looks like a child who just got disowned by their father for being too naughty. This theme of Homelander not killing the people he considers to be father figures could have actually been a helpful thing for him if either Vogelbaum or Edgar had taken into account what Homie really wanted, which was parental affection and approval. Instead, they treated him like a test subject and an object respectively, and that ended up breaking him down even more and allowing his psyche to give in to psychosis.
How long's it been, John?
Long enough that no one calls me John anymore.
If any one of his dads had taken the time to lecture their son once on the symbol of hope they needed him to become, we're sure Homie would have tried his best to live up to it. But alas, money and power hold more importance in the world of the boys than things like love, and so Homelander turned into the loveless wreck he is today. All because Vogelbaum didn't take on the role of a parent in addition to being Homelander's chief handler. Had he just treated John like a human being instead of a product, maybe Homie wouldn't become as terrible as he is today.
I never had a dad. Do you raise me like a fucking lab rat? Or a mom?
I was raised the same way as him.
His desire to start a family with Maeve, Stormfront, and later Soldier Boy remains his only redeeming quality. If Vogelbaum had created a family environment for Homelander from the beginning, Vought wouldn't have to contend with his madness today, a fact even he acknowledges despite having a direct hand in making Homie the monster he is. And while John has been able to let go of most of the other things that made him human over the years, morality, dreaming about the wild frontier, manifesting his own destiny and whatnot, the one thing he could never let go of was his urge to be a part of a family. And this is something we see in every relationship he has on the show. And we're not just talking about the ladies either. When he was told that he would be getting his own team, Homelander thought he was going to be able to experience what a family feels like for the first time. And when he got his team, and was thoroughly disappointed with their self-serving ways, which is quite hypocritical if you ask us, but well, each to their own, we guess. When he started dating Maeve, his end goal was always to start a nesting family of Supes with the only person he thought he could be lonely with. That came crashing down when Maeve revealed her true feelings towards him to his face. Even his tryst with Madeline was a sickening attempt at getting himself a somewhat functional family, though we have to admit that the way Homie looked at Teddy, we were concerned he might kill the baby instead of continuing the sibling rivalry he had with him. And when Homelander met Stormfront, we lost our absolute crap because can you imagine just how big of a threat any potential children they had would pose to the world? Not to mention that the only reason he even sought out Becca and Ryan in the first place was because he was being lied to about his own damn family. And to take things one step further, Eric Kripke actually teased Homie getting his team fulfilled before pulling the rug out from underneath him in the Season 3 finale when Soldier Boy assaults him and Ryan instead of joining them and becoming a true family. Homelander is constantly denied a piece of human emotion that's very basic and foundational, and most of the time it's his fault, but it isn't either, because the way he treats people is what he's been taught by Vought since birth. If Homelander actually got a family, he wouldn't be swell at handling them initially. Sure, but eventually, he might just become a great family man. And nowhere is this more evident than his interactions with Ryan.
I love it. I promise.
Nothing like you. I can't fly.
You can. I promise you can.
Homelander's love for Ryan is genuine, and their father-son relationship is his only remaining human quality. If you've seen The Boys, then you'll know that literally the only person John Homelander has been truthful with is his son Ryan. We're going to let you figure out the racial superiority implications of the same. But on a basic human level, we have to say that the biggest reason why we think Homelander isn't purely evil, but a product of his environment instead, is the fact that he treats his son Ryan like an actual human being, which is ironic because they're both the most powerful Supes of their respective generations.
I told you. You're just like me, Ryan.
No, I'm not like you.
But that is precisely why Homelander empathizes with Ryan, because at their core, they face the same social issues, and Homie knows what those issues can turn his son into. When he first drops by Becca's home unannounced, everyone is rightfully terrified of him, and Homelander tucking Ryan into bed whilst casually introducing a god complex to his psyche is one of the more disturbing things we've seen on TV. But the conversation he has with Becca after it is interesting, because while you'd assume that Homelander wanting to stay with them was because of some malicious plan he has for them, it was actually the opposite. Homelander genuinely wanted to spend time with his son, and even went on to point out the essential mistakes in Becca's parenting style, and accurately might we add, because when Ryan encountered a massive crowd for the first time in his life, he had a panic attack, and Homelander immediately threw his son out of there. He has been open and vulnerable with Ryan on multiple occasions, even surprising him by telling him that yes, Homelander cries.
Flew away. They found me 80 miles down the I-9. Crying my little eyes out.
John told Ryan the story of the first time he encountered a crowd, and how Vought's people later found him bawling his eyes out at the I-95, much like the experience Ryan himself had at Planet Vought. So we can see that even though his relationship with his own son is self-serving, I mean he did push Ryan off a roof to activate his powers without a worry in the world, he does genuinely care for Ryan, and that makes him the last human connection Homelander has left in this world. When Ryan kills Stormfront with his laser eyes, Homie doesn't zone in on him, he zones in on Butcher, and he even forgives Ryan for killing Stormfront, though calling it an accident isn't the kind of thing he should be teaching his own son. But hey, we're not here to judge his parenting. We're here to tell you that no matter how terrible a parent Homelander might be, there are whole truths in what he says about Ryan's future to Becca, because, well, he has experienced it himself, and he doesn't want that life for his son. And the most baffling thing is that the season finale shows us Ryan actively choosing to be Homelander's son, which is the kind of reciprocation Homie has craved his entire life, and might just be the catalyst for an eventual face turn for the guy. But this being The Boys, we're sure Eric Kripke will find a way to humanize Homie even more when Ryan inevitably turns on his evil father. So let's enjoy this twisted father-son dynamic while we can, shall we? Because when Ryan leaves him again, and he will, Homelander will truly become the pure evil that we already know he is, because Ryan is the last piece of his humanity, and when even that is taken from him, all that remains will be evil.
Taught you, father to son. Me too. But it's okay. We're not alone anymore.
Marvelous verdict. And that's a wrap. We just want to reiterate that this video in no way endorses or tries to whitewash Homelander's character. In fact, quite the opposite. It's meant to show you that this self-proclaimed god is the weakest human of all of his superpowered brethren, and draw your attention to the fact that, at least in the show, it isn't entirely his fault that he is the way he is. Heck, show Homelander doesn't drink or do drugs, both of which his comic book counterpart indulges in regularly. Homelander's favorite drug, you ask? Cocaine cut with human adrenaline. Not our words, the words of OD, the soup's dealer. But even that literally sobering detail is part of a persona that Vought carefully constructed for him. This entire list was an attempt at showing you how the strongest man on Earth was robbed of his agency early on, and how that was put the entire world at great peril. Because if Vogelbaum had just treated John more like a son and less of a test subject, perhaps Homelander wouldn't be a poster boy of an alt-right movement today. But that ship set sail a long time ago, and all that remains for us to do is observe the consequences. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone!
Now? After you raised me like a fucking lab rat?